Okay, we're going in alphabetical order. Here's some quotes from the Holy Grail of Wisdom quotes by me, P. Rogers. We're going to do Will Durant, and first a quote or two from Errol Durant. She was his wife. She was also a historian that worked with him on his books. Here's one of her quotes: "Beauty is in the eye of the gonads. Education is the transmission of civilization." Okay, so Will Durant was a good historian. He lived almost 100 years, from 1885 to 1981. He had been in the seminary when he was younger, so he had a little bit of a religious background, which I like. And he was trying to give everybody a good summary of the last 3,000 years. I think he was a little bit too much emphasis on being comprehensive, kind of like a college professor would be, rather than just hitting the highlights. Because I don't really care about comprehensiveness. The more comprehensive somebody is, the more they're going to talk about a bunch of boring stuff, which I don't really want to hear, and all the wars and stuff. I don't really care about that. It's kind of like what Schopenhauer said. The history of, knowledge and art is wonderful and entertaining and pleasant and joy. The history of wars and conflicts is kind of depressing. You need to know about it so you're tuned into real life. So Durant sometimes a little lame. He would fall in love with scumbags who I hated, like Diderot. Diderot was an atheist scumbag of France in the late 1700s, who led to the disaster of 1789 to 1794 with the guillotine and all the terrible things that happened there. Diderot wrote the Encyclopedia in France, which is like 35 volumes, and it was, a big goal to make a universal encyclopedia source of knowledge in one spot. I think that was admirable, but the atheism was a disaster. Okay, and Voltaire was in on that big, and Durant loves Voltaire. I mean, I could see somebody loving Voltaire because he's funny, he's clever, he's entertaining, and he did some good things. But he was also partners with Diderot and the philosophes and Rousseau and other scumbags that brought about disaster in France and Europe in general. But he's got some good quotes. Let's get to some of his quotes. Okay, he sort of has the great man approach to history. So the great man approach is to basically talk about the geniuses of an age, the movers and shakers, and what they said or did, versus some people are more events-based, or like a sociologist or something. So here's a quote of Durant. "The real history of man is the lasting contributions made by geniuses to the sum of human civilization and culture. And so with every country, its history is properly the history of its great men. I see history as the struggle of men through genius. I see men standing on the edge of knowledge and holding the light a little farther ahead." Okay, well, that's a good quote, because that's kind of what you try to do. You try to make things a little bit better for the next generation to come along after you. And the scumbags in power try to block useful information for coming, because they got a monopoly on power, and power comes from keeping the proles ignorant, so they don't want the proles to know anything. Okay, according to Will Durant, he says, that Plato was against the idea of love between a man and a man, or a woman and a woman. He felt that was unnatural, according to Plato. And the reason why Will Durant would talk about this, there's some people who try to say the ancient Greeks were very big into that sort of thing. And then there's other people like Will Durant who come along and say, no, that's all exaggerated. Okay, and the people who will say that will say, that's why Oscar Wilde was so in love with the ancient Greeks. That's why Nietzsche was so in love with the ancient Greeks, okay? And that's sort of the big theory of Nietzsche, that he was a homosexual, and that's why he didn't like Christianity, and he liked the ancient Greeks better, especially before Socrates, okay? Now, the truth of all that, I'm not certain, and I don't really care, but that's just one thing that comes up. But I do think Nietzsche is quite overrated. Nietzsche is quite overrated. He's very entertaining, but again, he's like a jerk. When you want to know how somebody is, ask yourself who their heroes are. Okay, Nietzsche's hero was Napoleon and Bismarck, okay? Kind of warmonger guys, okay? I prefer, better heroes than that. Okay, Will Durant continues. Plato was a pre-Christian Puritan. Yeah, Plato's a pain in the butt. If you really study ancient Greek history, you're going to see you're not going to like Plato that much compared to Aristotle. Aristotle's much better person, man, everything than Plato. Plato was real interested in collectivism because he'd seen that Sparta had beaten Athens, and therefore he felt in many ways the collectivism of Sparta was better than the individualism of Athens, and I totally disagree with that. Symposium is a dialogue which is the best introduction to Plato. The Republic is the greatest of Plato's dialogues. And Plato believed in eugenics, breed the best man to the best woman. None of this random breeding, He said, you breed animals for getting out the best results. Why shouldn't you breed humans the same way? Charles Darwin agreed with that as well. Okay, another thing Will Durant says here is Plato's thinking was like that of the Grand Inquisitor. He believed the only way to control the ignorant masses was with noble sounding lies. He felt, the vast majority of people are too stupid to really have real philosophy. Therefore, you have to have a noble lie to control them. Okay, and that's actually the way most secular rulers think. Okay, and if you don't know that, then that means you believe the lies. Okay, Plato was a philosopher who wanted to be a playwright. Euripides was a playwright who wanted to be a philosopher. That's actually one of the great things about Plato, though, was because he had failed as a politician, he knew politics, and he had failed as a playwright, and he knew how to write plays. So when he wrote philosophy, he put it in the form of a play, a dialogue with Socrates as a hero character, and they're actually quite entertaining. Alfred North Whitehead said, all philosophy is just a footnote to Plato. Okay. Will Durant, when a religion consents to reason, it begins to die. Yeah, it actually helps a religion to stay in power if it censors its opponents. But, I like Christianity because Christianity can take a joke. Unlike most religions, they can't take a joke. Christianity can take a joke. And I think that's good. It makes it a lot more fun. Will Durant, Greek philosophy destroyed the Greek religion, which had formed the moral strength of ancient Greece. Plato's perspective was mystical. Aristotle's perspective was medical. Yes, Socrates was accused of disrespecting the gods, and he got in trouble for that. Okay, Will Durant continues. Humanism, which is sort of the Platonism type of Christianity, or Protestant type, you could say. I went through Augustine. That dethroned scholasticism. Scholasticism type of scholarship in Christianity was the Aristotelian type of Christianity that came from, as well, Thomas Aquinas. Thomas Aquinas, the great unifier of faith and reason, had made Aristotle respectable within the Catholic Church. And that's the best strain of Christianity, in my opinion. Will Durant, Roman Catholicism did not replace paganism, it adopted it. Okay, that's another criticism sometimes of Catholicism. People say, well, it's too paganistic. And they say it's paganistic compared to Protestantism because Protestantism says sola fide, sola scriptura, sola biblia. Only faith, only the Bible. Versus Catholicism is, you have to have faith, you also have to do good works. And Catholicism, Catholic Church says, look, we were around for hundreds of years before the Bible was consolidated, sometime in, 350 around there AD, all right? Constantine and all that, versus the Catholic Church was around a long time. And so what's some of the differences? Catholic Church will also pray to the saints. They're not worshiping the saint. They're praying to the saint to ask him a favor. Hey, can you ask God if he'll, help me with this or that? And I think it's a good thing. I can tell you, I seen, how my mother lived. She loved all the saints. She had statues of all the saints, and she was like the happiest, nicest person I've ever seen in my life. And my aunts from Puerto Rico are like her, Pepita, okay? And it's a real emotional type of Christianity. I actually think a lot of that Hispanic Christianity is Christianity from the heart. And a lot of the European Christianity is cerebral Christianity, and I think it's good to have both. But if I had to pick one, I'd take the from the heart over from the brain, because like I see my Irish cousins, they're more intellectual, they read more books, but they're also more stupid, okay? With sophistry, you can trick them into all kinds of things, versus you could never trick my mother against Puerto Rico, against Christianity. Jesus Christo is her best friend, all right? You could never trick them. They're strong versus if you have a lightweight intellect and you have them managed by philosophy, it's easy to trick them into all kinds of things. I've seen that with my cousins. My Puerto Rican family is smarter than my Irish family. Let's see. Raphael's painting in the Stanza della Segnatura is the apex of Renaissance art, with a harmony of philosophy, science, and religion. Yeah, it's a masterpiece. It's right behind me. Here it is. The School of Athens. It's just a masterpiece. And it's mostly Greek philosophers and scholars and scientists and stuff in the background of Roman architecture. It's beautiful. It's magnificent. Let's see. Also, another thing about Catholic Church I like better than Protestant is, it celebrates the Holy Family, the Virgin Mary, Joseph the Father. It's all there, the whole family. Versus Protestantism is more dry, Bible only. Okay, give me a break. You know what? People are a little bit tired of too much theology, and it's too dogmatic, and people are going to disagree on lots of little parts of it. So, Catholic Church lets you be happy. Today is St. Patrick's Day. Yay, let's have a party. Okay, today is Christmas. Yay, let's have a party. Today is some other saint's day. Yay, let's take the day off from work. People are happy. Okay, that's a good thing. My mother would have little statues of the saints. Like if somebody in the family was sick or a friend was sick, she'd bring her little statue of the saint. She'd go stay in the hospital with them overnight, and she'd pray for them, okay? And they would do real well. My mother saved one of the grandchildren in my family's life by living in the ICU for a couple of weeks and praying every day, and I think that saved that kid's life, lowered his stress level tremendously, always having grandma there. Okay, let's see, what else does he say? Pietà is the greatest sculpture in the world. Yeah, look at all the magnificent art that Christianity produces. It's the best in the world, by far. There's nothing even in the ballpark of it. Michelangelo was devout, almost a Puritan. His favorite book was the Divine Comedy of Dante, okay? Michelangelo was a loner. He's a super genius. Leonardo da Vinci's totally overrated, okay? God, he just gets praised a lot because he's a homosexual and he's a little bit anti-Christian. Michelangelo was 1,000 times better artist. Just go look at their work. Michelangelo, the greatest artistic achievement ever, painting the Sistine Chapel and the creation of Adam, okay? Michelangelo, sculpture, the Pietà, other magnificent sculptures. His painting, The Last Judgment, it's just beyond incredible. It's like almost supernatural. It's so magnificent. Whatever did Leonardo da Vinci do? His painting of the Last Supper, it's just so-so. And his Madonna of the Rocks, it's just so-so. And that's about all he ever did. One painting of the Annunciation, and so-so. He's totally overrated. He's made some scribblings in his notebook. So what? Okay? He's totally overrated. He could draw well. Okay, let's see. What else did he say? Pope Julius died 4 months after Michelangelo finished the Sistine Chapel. Pope Julius is my favorite pope. He did exactly what a pope should do. He protected Italy from France. He was a brave guy. He commissioned Michelangelo and Raphael, two of the greatest artists of all time, to make the greatest artworks of all time. That's money well spent. He rebuilt St. Peter's Basilica, with Michelangelo's help, and Bernini. Okay, what else did he do? He, let's see, what else? Oh, so those were the great popes. Yeah, and he also, had mistresses and kids. Good. I wish all the popes and the priests had girlfriends and wives and children. Then they would be a lot more well-rounded. They would be much better. Okay, Will Durant. Raphael was the best painter to show the harmony between paganism and Christianity. Yes, and there should be harmony. The ancient Greeks feed into Christianity a tremendous amount. And you can call me irreligious, but I'll tell you something. They're almost as important to Christianity as the Old Testament. I realize that's a controversial statement, and everybody will say the Old Testament's a lot more important. And of course it is with Genesis and everything else. But the ancient Greeks are super important. There's a reason why the New Testament was written in Greek. There's a ton of stuff that's come to us. The Aristotelian strain of Christianity through Aquinas and the Renaissance. The Augustinian strain from Plato to Augustine to Martin Luther and the Protestants. Okay, Durant continues. Michelangelo frightens us. Da Vinci puzzles us. Raphael puts us at peace. Okay. Rome is the center of the Catholic faith. Yep, it sure is. Not anymore, though. The current pope is the Antichrist piece of crap. Until they allow priests to get married, the popes and the priests are always going to stink. That's the most necessary step. You got to get rid of 503 exemption because that makes them intellectually castrated so they don't say anything interesting. Okay, Will Durant continues. The Italian language is the triumph of the vowel over the consonant. Vowels are much more musical than consonants because a singer can hold them. Here's a typical beautiful name of an Italian scholar. Pico della Mirandola. It's musical. It's beautiful. The Italian language is overflowing with rhyme and rhythm. It's easy to translate the thoughts of Petrarch's poetry, but how could one translate the music of it? The Italian Renaissance had more geniuses than Periclean Athens. Will Durant. Okay, so that's part one of Will Durant. Quotes. I hope you enjoyed that.